Emily Parker boarded the flight from San Diego International Airport with a calm and poised demeanor that only seasoned business leaders carry. At 45, she wasn't just the head of Parker Innovations, a rapidly growing green energy tech firm, but also a symbol of resilience and strength in a world still shadowed by harsh biases. Her deep blue tailored blazer hugged her elegant frame, and her glossy black heels moved gracefully yet decisively across the terminal floor. She was the embodiment of a woman who had achieved success not just through talent, but through unyielding perseverance in the face of adversity. Stepping into the business class cabin, surrounded by warm golden lighting, soft leather seats and finely crafted details, felt like entering another realm, one of power and privilege. Emily was no stranger to this space. She had flown on countless international flights, receiving the highest standard of service. Seat 5B by the window was her usual preference, not just for comfort, but for the quiet moments it offered, perfect for reflection before making critical decisions. With a gentle hand, she tucked her leather handbag beneath the seat, taking a long breath to balance the weight of external pressures with the privacy of this moment. Within moments, what seemed like an ordinary flight began to shift. A young flight attendant named Maya Collins, only 24, approached with a polite smile that lacked sincerity. "Excuse me, ma'am. We have a seat reassignment request from another VIP passenger. Would you be willing to switch seats?" Her voice was gentle, but carried a clear undertone of expectation. Emily blinked calmly, her eyes lighting up slightly as she responded with absolute composure. "May I ask why?" Her voice was soft yet resolute, the tone of someone unwilling to yield to unreasonable demands. Maya hesitated, her smile faltering as she struggled to maintain composure. "There's a very important VIP who needs this seat." What Emily heard was more than a request. It was an unspoken message that, as a woman of color, even her accomplishments didn't earn her full respect in this space. She glanced around the cabin, sensing the growing curiosity of other passengers. Whispers began to rise, gently stirring the silence. Sitting up straighter, her eyes narrowing slightly with resolve, she spoke clearly. "This is my seat, and I've paid for it in full." There was no room left for debate in her voice. The cabin grew tense. Maya retreated and soon returned with the service manager, Richard Hale, a stern, middle-aged man. He addressed Emily with a composed yet firm tone. "Per policy, when a VIP request is made, we expect passengers to cooperate." Emily remained unmoved. Her voice carried an unmistakable authority. "I'm not an ordinary passenger. I paid for this seat, and I will not be moved." Her words sliced through the false politeness that masked the injustice unfolding before her. Emily understood that this wasn't just a dispute over seating. It was a statement about dignity and justice in a world riddled with invisible barriers. She remained still, gazing out the window, her heart steady, yet burning with determination. This wasn't just her battle. It was for everyone who had ever been undervalued, told to step aside because of their skin color or gender. In moments like these, silence often speaks louder than any protest. Emily knew this was only the beginning of a fight she couldn't back down from, not just for this flight, but for the deeper values she stood for. And at 35,000 feet, amid luxury and pressure, she drew an unshakable line of defiance, a quiet yet undeniable declaration that could not be ignored. As the cabin atmosphere grew more stifling, flight attendant Maya Collins returned, this time accompanied by Richard Hale, the service manager, a man in his early 50s with a stern expression and a voice that carried the weight of authority. Their words no longer came as a polite request, but as an order, as if some invisible force was pressing down on Emily. "Ma'am, per the airline's standard procedure, when there's a request from a VIP passenger, we expect your cooperation in relocating," Richard said with a firm tone, still trying to maintain a veneer of politeness. His eyes scanned her, as if testing the limits of the woman seated before him. But Emily, with unwavering calm and rare decisiveness, responded gently, "I paid in full for this seat, and there is no reason for me to move. This is not about procedure, it is about respect." Her voice wasn't raised or sharp, but it was precise and unyielding, slicing through the thin veil of pretense masking the injustice at hand. The manager took a seat across from Emily, attempting to assert control, but the atmosphere in the cabin had already shifted. Nearby passengers began to watch quietly, their curious gazes tinged with unease. What had started as a minor incident had now become a symbol of injustice, discrimination, and silent bias endured by many. Emily realized that this was no longer just about a seat on a plane, but a stage for the long-standing battle between power and fairness. Not wanting the situation to spiral out of control but refusing to be cornered, Emily took out her phone and called David Monroe, the head of procurement at her firm, a man who oversaw multi-million-dollar contracts with Pacific Air. In a calm but commanding voice, she said, "David, suspend all negotiations with Pacific Air immediately. No exceptions." David didn't ask for clarification. He simply acknowledged her words with the gravity they deserved and issued the order. In that very moment, inside the aircraft cabin, both the flight attendant and the manager could feel a shift in pressure, an invisible weight that signaled a seismic change about to unfold. With each passing minute, this incident transcended a simple airline dispute, spreading through boardrooms and offices across the corporation. Emails and phone calls were fired off like shockwaves, demanding accountability from Pacific Air. Public outrage and media attention soon followed after a nearby passenger captured Emily's silent yet steadfast defiance and posted it online, sparking thousands of shares, comments, and messages of support. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, CEO Michael Townsend and his executive team felt the intensity of the backlash. Emergency meetings were called. Business metrics began to plummet, and lucrative contracts were at risk. The boardroom became a pressure cooker. Some leaders argued to maintain the status quo, while others began to acknowledge that reform was not only necessary, it was inevitable. Amid the chaos, Emily remained composed. She didn't demand an apology or show anger. Instead, she delivered a clear, irrefutable message to the airline. If they wished to continue doing business, they had to commit to transparent, responsible change. A formal meeting was arranged, attended by top airline executives and Emily herself. She did not appeal emotionally, but laid out concrete terms: independent audits, mandatory bias training, whistleblower protection policies, and a public progress report on reforms. These weren't personal demands, but a voice on behalf of millions worn down by enduring injustice. Emily knew this was only the beginning, a line she had to draw, so that this world could no longer allow silent prejudice to persist in any form. And there, high above the clouds, She sat steadfast, her heart and will igniting a quiet flame that promised to spark sweeping change in the days to come. The pressure in the cabin grew thicker with each passing moment, as every eye fixed on Emily, as though she stood in the center of an invisible arena. Flight attendant Maya and manager Richard knew that her quiet refusal was far more than a simple no. It was the embodiment of a challenge they could no longer ignore. They retreated to the operations room, exchanging anxious glances and hushed sighs. Minute by minute, the situation spiraled out of control, becoming the eye of a media storm that had yet to erupt. Emily remained in her seat, calm and composed, her mere presence enough to fill the air around her with tension. Passengers began to whisper, some voicing quiet support, others observing with silent confusion and curiosity. No one could predict how this standoff would end, but everyone sensed something far greater unfolding beneath the surface. Soon after, David Monroe, the company's head of procurement, received an urgent call from Emily. He immediately ordered a halt to all ongoing negotiations with Pacific Air and reported the incident to the executive board. At company headquarters, a wave of emergency meetings and emails swept through departments, responding to the strategic implications of Emily's decision. A multi-million-dollar contract now dangled on the edge, dependent entirely on how the airline chose to handle the crisis. Back on the plane, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. Maya glanced at Emily with a mix of apprehension and regret, while Richard tried to maintain his stern demeanor, though his eyes betrayed a sense of unease. This was no longer about a seat. It had become a symbol of a cultural reckoning the airline was utterly unprepared for. Every move Emily made was observed not just by those in the cabin, but by a growing audience online. A nearby passenger had captured the moment Emily sat firm and posted it on social media with a caption that read, "She's not just holding a seat, she's holding her dignity." The post spread quickly, resonating with thousands who expressed their exhaustion with enduring bias and their admiration for Emily's unwavering strength. Media outlets picked up the story, broadcasting features and commentary that questioned the persistence of discrimination within the airline industry. Meanwhile, at Pacific Air headquarters, CEO Michael Townsend and his leadership team faced a mounting crisis. Business metrics revealed sharp declines, stock prices were plummeting, and major partners began to reconsider their collaborations. The boardroom buzzed with tension, the weight of the moment reflected in every heavy breath and furrowed brow. Michael knew this wasn't just a customer service mishap. It was a full-blown trust crisis, demanding immediate and decisive action. Intense debates broke out among executives. Some clung to the existing system, fearing disruption, but others, particularly younger, forward-thinking leaders, recognized that only real, transparent change could repair the brand and restore public trust. Amid the storm, Emily remained resolute. She represented not only Parker Innovations, but millions who had endured silent injustices. She issued a firm message: respect is not negotiable, and it is not optional. It is a fundamental right. A high-level meeting was convened with Emily at the table, where they would discuss clear conditions to drive sustainable change in the airline's corporate culture. The meeting between Emily Parker and the executive board of Pacific Air took place in a gleaming glass-walled conference room on the top floor of the airline's headquarters. Natural light flooded the space, reflecting off transparent walls, Yet the atmosphere remained heavy with tension and anticipation. Emily, poised in her deep navy suit and unshakable composure, laid out a detailed proposal in front of each attendee. The documents were meticulously marked with clear sections, from independent audit requirements to employee anti- discrimination training plans, from the establishment of whistleblower protection channels to periodic transparency reports. Her voice did not need to be loud, yet every word carried undeniable weight and authority. She made it clear that this was not a list of personal demands, but essential standards for rebuilding corporate culture, so that no one else would have to endure the pain and injustice she had experienced. The board members sat in silence. Some nodded in agreement, others seemed hesitant, but none could deny the significance of what was being presented. Michael Townsend, the CEO of Pacific Air, spoke with a tense expression. "We understand this issue goes beyond standard customer service. These changes will be costly and require time. But we have no other choice if we want to preserve our reputation and maintain a long-term partnership with Parker Innovations." Another executive added, "Transparency, training, and whistleblower protections will change how we operate, not just for the flight attendants, but at every level of this company." Emily listened, her gaze unwavering. "This is not just a verbal commitment," she stated firmly. "We need the contract to reflect genuine transformation. If the terms are not met, the partnership cannot continue." Her words echoed through the room like a final, unflinching warning. Though doubts may have lingered in their minds, no one could ignore Emily's resolve. The meeting concluded in a solemn yet hopeful mood. As Emily exited the room, she felt she had laid the first foundational stone for a deep and necessary transformation. She knew the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but for the first time in years, she sensed a new wind blowing through the rigid walls of Pacific Air. Soon after, the airline began implementing mandatory training programs for all employees, from cabin crew and service staff to the highest levels of management. These sessions focused not only on service skills, but delved into unconscious bias, diversity, and fairness. The transformation was not easy. Many veteran staff expressed resistance and skepticism, dismissing the initiative as a PR stunt meant to placate public outrage. Yet many others, especially younger employees, began to reflect more deeply on their roles and responsibilities in building a fair and respectful workplace. Emily closely monitored the reform process, regularly communicating with colleagues, sending words of encouragement, and recognizing tangible progress. Under her guidance, Pacific Air gradually cultivated a new culture, more transparent, more sustainable. The partnership contract with Parker Innovations was renewed, not merely as a business agreement, but as a symbol of a shared commitment to meaningful change. Emily's journey with Pacific Air became a widely shared story of inspiration, a testament to the power of perseverance and the courage to stand up for dignity and rights. Through adversity and steadfast confrontation, a new culture began to take root, lighting a path for other organizations and individuals to follow. After weeks of tension and challenge, the transformation at Pacific Air gradually became visible through the smallest details in daily operations. The training sessions were no longer seen as mere formalities, but had evolved into sincere dialogues that opened new perspectives on diversity, respect, and fairness. Although skepticism and hesitation still lingered among some employees, the overall atmosphere had shifted, gradually infused with a growing sense of social responsibility and human values. In her role as both leader and overseer of this transformation, Emily did not limit herself to setting demands or enforcing compliance. She took time to visit each department, speaking with employees, listening to their stories, and sharing her own powerful personal experiences. She understood that real change required more than policies and procedures. It needed to come from deep within each individual. That sense of connection, empathy, and shared purpose laid a solid foundation for lasting progress. Resistance, however, was inevitable. Some long-time employees viewed the transformation as a threat to their old routines and long-held privileges. Whispered conversations, doubts about the effectiveness of the training sessions, and skepticism toward the new cultural direction began to surface. Some claimed this was just a public relations stunt to quiet the media storm, and that things would soon return to their old ways. But the unwavering efforts of Emily and her dedicated team created a compelling momentum, gradually breaking through inertia and steering Pacific Air toward a new horizon. During this period, the partnership contract between Parker Innovations and Pacific Air was renewed. Yet this time, it was no longer just a business agreement. It became a symbol of transparency, responsibility, and commitment to the core values Emily had consistently stood for. Every clause in the contract was tied to measurable standards, from the pace of staff training to customer satisfaction metrics, ensuring that Pacific Air would not only promise change, but deliver it. The story of Emily and the transformation at the airline quickly spread throughout the business community and broader society. Many organizations looked to this journey as a model to learn from and implement, creating a ripple effect of positive change. The media praised her not only as a successful CEO, but as a powerful cultural reformer in an industry often fraught with human and social challenges. Emily's perseverance, resolve, and strategic vision proved that true strength often lies not in loud declarations or dramatic gestures, but in steadfastness, clarity of purpose, and a refusal to yield to injustice. The simple act of remaining in her seat, holding on to her dignity, became an enduring symbol, a reminder that every person deserves to be treated with fairness and respect. Emily did more than transform an airline. She touched the hearts and minds of those who had ever felt pushed to the margins of society. She became a source of inspiration for anyone quietly fighting for fairness and respect in their own lives. Above all, her story stands as a powerful reminder that change begins with courageous actions, no matter how small, so long as they are consistent and resolute. Inside Pacific Air's headquarters, a level of tension never before seen had overtaken what was once a calm and orderly workplace. The executive boardroom, typically reserved for high-level strategic discussions, had now become ground zero for heated debates. Michael Townsend, the 54-year-old CEO, known for his composure and decisiveness, now bore the visible weight of sleepless nights and growing pressure on his face. Standing before the leadership team, with a piercing gaze and a voice both direct and heavy with urgency, he declared, "We cannot downplay what's happened. The multi-million-dollar contract with Parker Innovations is hanging by a thread. Customer trust and shareholder confidence are on the brink." Within the boardroom, the leadership was split into two factions. On one side were those clinging to old habits, insisting that this was merely a minor incident that could be managed through media spin and an apology. They feared that change would disrupt operations and incur costly consequences. On the other side, younger, more progressive members saw this as a chance to revitalize the company's corporate culture and rebuild a truly sustainable and principled brand identity. Emergency meetings were held back to back, some so intense that raised voices echoed down the hallways. Michael stood firm. "We can no longer dodge this. If we don't change, we'll lose not only this major contract, but the very future of Pacific Air." He emphasized that in today's world, social media and public discourse had become powerful judges, and the airline had no escape route left. Meanwhile, at Parker Innovations, Emily Parker quietly monitored every move Pacific Air made through reports and updates from David Monroe. She understood that real transformation required mutual commitment and decisive action. But she also couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, seeing the airline finally begin to understand the gravity of its responsibilities. The incident had triggered a ripple effect, not only causing Pacific Air's stock to dip, but also forcing many of its major partners to re-evaluate their collaborations. Calls from customers, stakeholders, and business partners poured in, many expressing disappointment and even concern over the airline's reputation. Michael and his executive team found themselves caught between crushing external pressure and growing internal unrest. The boardroom grew increasingly heavy with tension as financial figures were analyzed in detail and a string of negative reports were presented. Department heads began proposing emergency measures to restore the company's image and manage the crisis. PR experts were brought in, and communication campaigns were drafted at record speed. As night fell, in a dimly lit office, Michael Townsend remained alone, the glow from his computer screen casting soft shadows across his face filled with concern. He stared at a photo taken the day he first assumed the role of CEO, back when the airline was thriving and untouched by scandal. Now, everything seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse. Beside him, the company's chief legal officer gently warned, "If we don't comply with the conditions Emily Parker has laid out, we won't just lose a contract. We'll lose key partnerships. This could be a turning point in the company's survival." Michael let out a deep sigh, the fatigue etched across his features. "We can't spin this with PR anymore. It's time for real change." His words rang like an alarm bell for the entire leadership and staff. This was no longer just one person's story. It had become a lesson in responsibility, ethics, and fairness in the reality of modern business. The morning at Pacific Air's headquarters was unlike any other. Gentle sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows, reflecting off the polished marble floors. Yet the air in the boardroom remained thick with tension. The executive team, from CEO Michael Townsend to all senior directors, were present. Each person felt the weight of the moment, knowing this meeting would not only determine the airline's future, but also serve as a definitive statement about its commitment to transforming corporate culture. Emily Parker entered the room, wearing a refined navy suit, her gaze sharp yet composed. She wasn't there to debate or compromise. She was there to present final demands and concrete conditions for renewing the partnership with Pacific Air. One by one, Emily laid out the documents in detail, from establishing independent audit systems to oversee the transformation to implementing mandatory training on diversity and anti-discrimination, and introducing clear protocols to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. Michael Townsend and the executives listened carefully to each item, their eyes reflecting fatigue and pressure. But beyond that was a deep awareness of the responsibility to change in order to preserve the company's credibility and survival. Michael finally spoke. "We understand these demands are not simple. They will require resources and time, but we are committed to seeing them through to rebuild trust with our customers and partners." One senior director added gravely, "We will roll out comprehensive training programs, establish transparent reporting channels, and ensure that every employee, from flight attendants to upper management, fully understands the importance of diversity and respect." The leadership team nodded in agreement, signaling their resolve to stand alongside Emily through this challenge. Emily responded with a calm but resolute smile. "This is not about personal grievances or minor negotiations. This is a declaration of a new culture, one where no one is left behind because of their skin color, gender, or any other prejudice. We cannot let this happen again. The conditions I've outlined are mandatory benchmarks for continuing our partnership." Silence swept through the room, each of Emily's words striking like nails into the crumbling wall of inequality and injustice. Some members hesitated, but none dared challenge her directly. They understood that refusing would mean forfeiting one of their most valuable contracts and potentially destroying the airline's public image. The meeting did not end with symbolic handshakes, but with spoken and actionable commitments. Emily walked out of the boardroom with a mix of relief and responsibility. She knew this was just the beginning, that the road ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. But she believed that with perseverance and resolve, Pacific Air could become a model for transformation in the aviation industry. Immediately after, detailed plans and discussions were set in motion to launch the reform initiatives. Employees across departments were invited to attend training sessions and awareness workshops. Monitoring and evaluation systems were updated to ensure transparency and effectiveness. The atmosphere began to shift, from hesitation to hope and determination. In the following weeks, progress reports were sent back to Parker Innovations, demonstrating that real change was underway. Employees who had once been skeptical began to see that this was not just a fleeting movement, but a profound shift toward a workplace grounded in fairness, respect, and inclusivity. Partners and customers noticed the difference as well, through surveys and positive feedback. Emily knew the journey was far from over, but every step forward was a brick laid toward the future she and so many others envisioned. Her act of standing firm in dignity on that flight had now become a source of powerful inspiration, not just for change at Pacific Air, but for a broader wave of transformation across the business world and society at large. As time passed, the cultural transformation at Pacific Air became increasingly clear and deeply rooted in the company's daily operations. No longer were conversations or training programs seen as mere formalities. Instead, a fundamental shift was taking place, step by step, laying the groundwork for a truly fair and respectful working environment. Emily Parker was not just the overseer of this transformation, but also the quiet force of inspiration that motivated everyone to move forward together. Each morning, she arrived early at the airline's headquarters, walking through the wide hallways where skeptical glances once followed her steps. Now, Those stares had been replaced by warm looks and genuine smiles. She never hesitated to greet employees by name, to ask about their lives, to listen to their everyday stories and personal challenges. These conversations not only gave her deeper insight into the internal struggles, but also strengthened her commitment to long-term, meaningful change. In internal meetings, voices that had long been ignored were now being heard with seriousness. Many long-time employees who once resisted or doubted the process began to change their attitudes, realizing that fairness was not just a slogan, but a reality that could make a difference. Open discussions became more frequent, giving space for everyone to express opinions and contribute to shaping a new Pacific Air, one where every individual is treated with dignity and respect. However, the journey was not without setbacks. Invisible barriers, old habits, and deeply rooted biases still lingered, sometimes surfacing through inappropriate comments or behavior. Emily did not overlook these issues. She addressed them promptly, reinforcing advanced training programs, setting clearer and stricter standards to prevent recurrence, and cultivating a culture of accountability. Customer satisfaction surveys also reflected significant improvement in service experiences. Passengers not only felt professionalism and warmth, but also sensed sincerity in the way they were treated. That for Emily and the team was the most valuable reward. Proof that change from within had begun to show on the outside. Emily did not limit her influence to within the company. She regularly shared her story and experiences at conferences and forums on corporate leadership and cultural diversity, inspiring organizations and individuals alike. Her journey became a symbol of perseverance, of standing up for dignity and rights, not just for herself, but for an entire community. One day, during a company-wide meeting, Michael Townsend, CEO of Pacific Air, stood on stage with a voice that had clearly changed. He was no longer the rigid and commanding leader of before, but someone who now understood and truly listened. He acknowledged past mistakes and pledged to continue walking alongside his employees and partners in building a corporate culture rooted in inclusion, diversity, and fairness. The room erupted in heartfelt applause, not just for Michael or Emily, but for everyone who had contributed to the transformation. That atmosphere was more than just a momentous event. It marked the beginning of a new era, one where every individual is recognized for their worth and respected for who they are. Emily knew well that this journey would never truly end. Change is a continuous process, demanding patience and unwavering commitment. But she also believed, with the foundation already laid by her own resolve, Pacific Air was well on its way to building a better future. A future where anyone, regardless of their role, could proudly board a plane with the full assurance of equality and absolute respect. As time went on, the story of Emily Parker became more than just a symbol for a single airline. It grew into a powerful source of inspiration across the business world and society at large. One gentle autumn morning, she stood in front of the Parker Innovations headquarters, sunlight filtering through the leaves as if casting its glow on the bright future she and her team had tirelessly built. The affectionate glances and grateful smiles from employees, partners, and supporters everywhere made every step she took feel deeply meaningful. Emily knew that the fight for fairness and respect had never been easy. In the years before, she had endured being underestimated, relegated to lesser roles simply because of her skin color and gender. But it was those very challenges that forged within her a spirit that would never surrender. A relentless will to defend dignity and rights, not just for herself, but for her community. Her story aboard the San Diego-New York flight had now become living proof of the power of resilience and the far-reaching impact of quiet but meaningful action. At the Pacific Air headquarters, the atmosphere had completely transformed. The portraits of former executives, once representing an era ruled by discrimination and injustice, had been replaced with images celebrating a diverse workforce from a multitude of cultures and ethnic backgrounds. The guest areas were redesigned with banners affirming the right of every passenger to be respected and treated equally. Workshops and regular listening sessions had become a hallmark of the company's evolving culture. Emily was frequently invited to speak at leadership summits and forums focused on diversity and inclusion. She didn't share her story to seek praise, but to emphasize that the right to be respected is non-negotiable, and that anyone can become a catalyst for change if they have the courage and persistence to stand firm. She reminded people that no force is greater than the quiet strength of someone who refuses to compromise their dignity, no matter the circumstances. Under the shimmering lights of the Pacific Air anniversary ceremony, Emily stood before employees, partners, and honored guests. Her voice was warm and full of emotion as she spoke. Today's victory is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who chose to speak up, who chose to stand tall in the face of pressure and prejudice. We are building a future where everyone is recognized for their true worth and lives with the respect they deserve. The applause that followed was not just a gesture of praise. It was a collective vow to the long road ahead. Emily knew that, while significant progress had been made, the work of building a fair and inclusive society was far from over. But she also understood that every brick laid, every story shared, every action taken, added to a legacy of lasting and undeniable change. The story of Emily Parker and the flight where she steadfastly upheld her dignity would continue to be passed down as a testament to the power of quiet resilience, to a voice not loud but deeply meaningful. It didn't just change an airline. It sparked transformation in the hearts and minds of countless people. And in this vast world, each person, through their own actions, has the power to become a builder of a more just and respectful future. As night fell over the city of San Diego, the bright lights of the towering skyscrapers only seemed to highlight the stillness inside Emily Parker's office. She stood by the window, looking down at the rush of traffic below, her heart filled with a swirl of emotions. The battle to uphold her dignity on that flight had not only transformed an airline, it had ushered in a new era for the core values of justice, respect, and human rights. Emily knew well that her legacy would not be measured in revenue figures or multi-million-dollar contracts, but in the stories of resilience and quiet strength she had helped ignite within the community and across the industry. She thought back to the words of her beloved grandmother, whose wisdom had carried her through countless storms. Hold on to your dignity, even when the world tries to bury it. Those words were a guiding light, a reminder that true power isn't found in noise, but in unwavering persistence. Her journey hadn't ended in the airplane cabin or the boardroom. It was a long, ongoing path, filled with challenges and obstacles, but also hope and transformation. She knew that every day, millions of others continued to face silent prejudice and invisible barriers, and she wanted her story to be a message that no one is alone in the fight for justice. She opened her laptop and began drafting a new document, a book that would not only tell her own story, but collect the voices of all those who had once been overlooked and who chose to stand up to be seen. This book would not be about a single individual, but about the power of community, about quiet voices that refuse to be silenced. That would be the legacy Emily wanted to leave behind, a legacy of silent strength, enduring persistence, and belief in change. Out there, the world kept moving, with people facing the same trials, standing at the crossroads of whether to surrender or to hold firmly to their place and dignity. Emily believed that, because of actions like hers, those people would not have to stand alone. The firm steps taken today would pave a path for future generations to walk with pride and trust in a more just world. She let out a quiet sigh, a soft smile forming on her lips as she envisioned a future where people are recognized and respected, not for their status or skin color, but for who they are and the value they bring. That, to her, was the true definition of success, the beginning of a meaningful journey she was ready to continue walking. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered beneath the silent night sky, as if to remind her that even in darkness, there is always a guiding light. And Emily Parker, with her quiet strength and unwavering resolve, was one of those lights, an eternal symbol of justice and dignity. Emily Parker's story is a powerful reminder that true strength comes from perseverance and dignity in the face of injustice. It reminds us that every person deserves respect and holds the power to spark meaningful change. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe so you won't miss more inspiring stories to come. And don't forget to leave a comment with 3 words that reflect your thoughts. For example, stand with dignity or never back down. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next story.